The Star Trek cast carried a secret for 60 years. They smiled at conventions, signed autographs, but privately harbored deep resentment toward their captain. William Shatner's behavior on set was so bad that crew members walked off. Scripts were rewritten to cut other actors' parts. Friendships were destroyed by his actions. In 2025, at age 94, Shatner finally confessed everything in a documentary that shocked Hollywood. What he revealed about his treatment of the cast explains why they avoided him for decades. His words will break your heart. William Shatner came into the world on March 22, 1931 at 11:45 p.m. in the quiet Notre Dame de Grasse neighborhood of Montreal. He was the only boy in a home with two sisters, Joy and Farah. And the family carried the weight of old traditions mixed with new ambition. His father, Joseph, had arrived in Canada when he was just 17. After leaving Austria-Hungary in the early 1900s. By the 1930s, he had built a clothing manufacturing business strong enough to keep the Shatners secure even during the Great Depression when most families were barely surviving. Little William grew up walking through his father's factory, watching the workers and noticing the people of Montreal who lived with real wealth. Those early moments planted two things inside him: curiosity about business and a deep respect for hard work. His mother, Anne Gomez, brought the softer side into the home. She loved the arts and believed discipline and creativity could live together. That mix of strictness and encouragement shaped the way William saw the world before he was even old enough to understand it. And was a trained elocution teacher, a rare job in the 1930s, and she saw something in her son long before others did. At age 8, she put him into children's acting classes, something very few families in Montreal would have paid for back then. By 10, he was on stage as Puck in A Midsummer Night's Dream, learning Shakespeare lines word for word and practicing them at home until his mother was satisfied. She pushed him hard, making him repeat lines for hours, but it built the voice and stage presence the world later recognized. William often said his mother's belief in him was the foundation of every bold choice he ever made. Growing up in Montreal meant living in two languages. From the moment he could speak, he was fluent in English and French by age 5. And went on to study at Westmount High School, an English institution founded in 1892. Only about 20% of its students were Jewish during the 1940s. Yet William never seemed intimidated. He jumped into debate clubs, public speaking contests, and school plays. At 14, he won first place in a provincial elocution competition for his Shakespeare recitations. The competition at Westmount was intense, the kind of academic and artistic pressure that quietly builds confidence. William later liked to mention that Leonard Cohen also studied there, a reminder of the talent that passed through the same halls. By age 6, he was already working, something almost unheard of for a child in the 1930s. He became a voice actor for CBC radio dramas, performing weekly during the years before and during World War II. His first role was in The Adventures of Billy Barker, which aired every Saturday night at 7:30 p.m. from 1937 to 1941. He stood on wooden boxes just to reach the microphone and still managed to deliver his lines perfectly. CBC archives show he completed more than 50 radio before turning 13. These wartime broadcasts reached millions of listeners, and they taught young William how to control his voice, shift emotion, and hold the attention of people he would never see. His family story reached even further back. His grandfather, Wolf Shatner, had been born in 1857 in Eastern Europe, likely in today's Ukraine or Lithuania. When Wolf immigrated to Canada in the early 1900s, he changed the family name From Shatner to Shatner, a common choice for immigrants who wanted acceptance in their new country. By the time William was born in 1931, the new name had already blended into their identity. That change carried a quiet meaning for him growing up, a reminder that survival sometimes required reinvention. His father, Joseph, never believed acting was a reliable career. But he didn't stop his son either. He took William to CBC radio studios in the late 1940s and waited while his son earned $3 per episode performing adventure stories. One CBC play in 1948 paid him exactly that for voicing several characters in 1 hour. William later said those drives with his father were some of the earliest moments that made him feel his dreams might actually lead somewhere, and helped him grow in other ways, too. At home, she organized little plays, where William always ended up being the lead. These family skits were improvised, silly, and full of costumes. But they helped him learn how to speak in front of people without fear. By age 12, he joined the Montreal Children's Theatre, founded in 1933, a place that focused on helping young actors build confidence and strong speech. The theater staged over 700 productions for more than 250,000 children by 2021, and William became one of its proud alumni. The stage lights and laughter from those shows stayed with him long after he moved on. As he entered his teen years, he found another place to grow. He joined Habunim, a Jewish youth group, where he took part in dramatic readings of Hebrew stories and folk plays during the 1940s. Those gatherings were small but powerful, filled with culture, pride, and stories that taught him how words could pull people together. Later in life, he understood that these were not just performances. They were lessons in identity and community. At 16, in the summer of 1947, he got a job at a YMCA camp in Quebec directing puppet shows. He earned $25 per week, which today would be about $300. It was the first time he earned real money through creativity. More importantly, the puppet shows forced him to give each character a different voice. That little exercise sharpened the vocal style that became famous years later in Star Trek. When William enrolled at McGill University in September 1949, he chose commerce as his major because it seemed practical, but he could never resist the pull of drama. He joined the Red and White Review, a comedy troupe known for sharp campus satire. Their sketches drew hundreds of students and professors. William spent countless nights rehearsing jokes and learning how timing could change everything. By the time he graduated in 1952, he knew one thing with complete certainty. His future was on a stage, not behind an office desk. During summer breaks from McGill, he performed with the Royal Mount Theatre Company in the Laurentian Mountains. The stage was tiny, the air was hot, and the actors constantly bumped into each other, but the audiences of 200 to 300 people loved the shows. He often played comedic roles in Shakespeare plays. Once while performing Twelfth Night as Sir Andrew Agashick, he slipped on a banana peel and accidentally fell off the stage. The crowd roared with laughter, and that moment stayed with him as proof that mistakes could turn into magic. After graduating, he took a job at the Mountain Playhouse in Vermont as an assistant manager. The pay barely covered his living costs, but he soaked up everything around him, watching experienced actors and practicing lines during quiet hours. He swept floors, sold tickets, cleaned dressing rooms, and memorized scripts late into the night. It was a tough start, but it built his resilience. In 1952, he stepped into the Canadian Repertory Theatre in Ottawa. He understudied lead roles and kept himself ready for anything. His big break came when the lead actor fell ill moments before a matinee performance. William took the stage with almost no preparation. delivered a powerful monologue, and earned a standing ovation. Critics noticed him immediately. That single performance proved he could handle pressure and win over a crowd, even in the hardest conditions. 2 years later, he set his sights higher. In 1954, he auditioned for the Stratford Shakespeare Festival in Ontario. Inspired by Sir Tyrone Guthrie, the festival hired him for the whole season and paid him $150 per week. Adjusted for today, that would be about $1,600. It was not enough to live comfortably, but it was enough to survive. He understudied roles in Henry V and Oedipus Rex, rehearsing long hours and learning how to deliver Shakespeare for sold-out shows where tickets cost up to $5, about $55 today. The work was exhausting, but the training was priceless. William Shatner stepped into New York in January 1956, thinking he was about to grab his future with both hands. He was 24, nervous, and standing backstage at the Winter Garden Theater for his Broadway debut in Tambourine the Great. The play was massive, loud, and full of British actors brought in fresh from Stratford. Shatner was given almost nothing to say. He played Usam Cassine, a loyal follower who carried the lead actor Anthony Quayle in a sedan chair and tried not to trip. For 12 days, the show roared on. Then it closed without warning. One moment, he was on Broadway. The next, he was standing in the cold New York air, wondering how something that felt so big could vanish so fast. It was thrilling and humbling at the same time. But it was enough to plant him in the city, and it pushed him into the next door that opened. That door opened in October 1958 at the Broadhurst Theater. The World of Susie Wong was supposed to be a quiet drama, but instead it turned into a storm that changed Shatner's life. France Nguyen, the leading actress, barely spoke English and learned her lines phonetically. Shatner played Robert Lomax, a young painter trying to make a place for himself. Early audiences didn't like the show. Reviews were rough, but director Joshua Logan kept shaping it, softening scenes, rewriting lines, guiding the cast until something clicked. The chemistry between Shatner and Nguyen became the talk of Broadway. The play caught fire, and Shatner performed 508 times over 15 months, running until January 1960. After that, nobody saw him as a background actor carrying a sedan chair. He was suddenly a rising Broadway star, with the city at his feet. His path to that stage had started years earlier in Toronto. In 1951, he showed up on a tiny Canadian film set for the Butler's Night Off. They called him Bill Shatner and handed him the role of a crook in a comedy no one expected to see twice. The budget was so small, the crew kept reusing props, and half the lines were made up on the spot. Shatner's scene was short, chaotic, and full of laughter from the cast when he tried to act serious. The whole thing was filmed in a few days. It was far from glamorous, but it was his first time on film, and it broke the ice for everything that followed. By 1958, he found himself in something completely different. MGM cast him as Alexei Karamazov in The Brothers Karamazov, filming in London and Paris.